Today's episode of Ham Radio 2.0 is brought to you by Bridgecom Systems. Are you looking for some 220 gear for the 1.25 meter amateur band? Think Bridgecom Systems for quality products and top-notch customer service. Featuring a new 220 mobile and HT, plus repeaters for all three bands, 2 meters, 220, and 440. See Bridgecom's full line of products at their website, www.bridgecomsystems.com, or just give them a call directly. When you think 220, think Bridgecom. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Ham Radio 2.0, live from the Ham Shack. My name is Jason. I am Kilo Charlie 5 Hotel Whiskey Bravo. And today we're going to be looking at a forum that I recorded at the Duke City Hamfest in August of 2016. And it's a very introductory type forum. It was done for attendees of the Hamfest who were not hams yet. And it's very basically titled, How to Become a Ham Radio Operator. Again, this is directed at people who attended the Hamfest who are not amateur radio operators. And it was put on by, the presentation was given by Gill into GG, November 2 Golf Golf. I emailed Gill 2 or 3 weeks before the show and asked him about recording his forum, and he said, yeah, come on, I'd love for you to do it. So here it is. One of the reasons I decided to get something kind of so basic is because I had a lot of good, positive response to the technician class that I put up. I think it was, I can't remember the dates right now. It was recorded earlier this year in 2016, and it was put on by the Hearst Amateur Radio Club here in the North Texas area. And it was 3 days, about 2.5 hours each day, so they were long videos. And it was 3 days of instructor-led classroom time about going through the W5YI technician book. And there was a lot of really good discussion and explanation of those questions in the book. And I've had a lot of people email me both through YouTube and through my website at livefromthehamshack.tv saying, you know, thank you for putting this video up. It helped me greatly. I'm either going to take my test next week or I just passed my test. And the information provided here helped me a lot. So, you know, this is not information that I provided to them. It's information that I recorded, someone else providing, and then I put it up on my YouTube channel. So, this presentation from the Duke City Hamfest in August of 2016 by Gill, November 2 Golf Golf, about how to become a ham radio operator. 73, and I hope you get some good information from this presentation.
Well, there's resources for that too. You know, it's like, okay, I got my license, what do I do now? Yeah. And I can talk about that. Okay. We'll kind of, because we're a pretty intimate group here, we can kind of wing it the way you guys feel the need needs to be. So, great. So maybe we'll whip through some of this introductory stuff pretty quickly, and then we'll open it up to more Q&A stuff. By the way, Jason is our videographer over here. He's making a video for YouTube, and you guys, if you guys want to get up close here, you could be famous.
What? Oh, yeah, good. Yep.
All right, my name is Gil, Gil Gray. I'm a long-time ham. I got my first license in 1958 when I was between 9th and 10th grade. So to save you the trouble, I'm 73. But I started studying ham radio when I was 13, and I didn't have an Elmer. Do you guys know what an Elmer is? An Elmer is somebody that helps you learn ham radio. And it's just slang that evolved over time. And because I didn't really have anybody, you know, to guide me, I had to do it the hard way, you know, trying to read magazines and books and stuff like that. But I was fascinated with the magic of radio, because to me it's still magic. I mean, I understand the technology of ionospheric, you know, propagation and stuff, but it's still magic in a way when you can talk in a microphone or hit a code key or on a keyboard, and somebody on the other side of the planet can understand it and hear it, and you can communicate back and forth without satellites and digital magic stuff, hi, come on in. If you sit in the front row, I won't ask you any questions. But if you sit and, well, I may ask you a question, I don't know. This is just a little handout of things to think about. Anyway, I was just introducing, I'm Gil, originally from Southern California. I've lived in New Mexico for over 16 years, love it here. Personally, I do a lot of HF, high frequency communication stuff, both phone and Morse code. To me, I was just commenting that to me it's like magic that you can communicate around the world with no wires and no satellites. It's just so much of a thrill to me, and you make friends all over the place in many countries. So one of the first things I like to ask is, why are you interested in becoming a ham radio operator? Anybody want to answer that?
No NSA snooping.
I could say it's harassment from your husband. No?
I said no NSA snooping.
Oh, snooping. Yeah, no NSA snooping. Well, not necessarily. The airwaves are free, Anybody can tune in and pretty much hear you. That's one thing. That's why we don't like to hear people talk too much about religion, politics, or profanity on the radio, because it's not really socially acceptable to do that. Number one, you're not going to change anybody's mind, typically, and it's kind of rude. So one thing nice about ham radio, from my perspective and a lot of other perspective, is it's a pretty clean hobby. There's a bunch of really nice people, mostly heart-centered people that like to help each other, and that's why they call amateur radio a service. They don't. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which will license you, or maybe already has, they call it the amateur radio service. It's not the amateur radio hobby, and it's a service because it's here to be of service in times of national or local disaster. And a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, what's the first mode of communication when you have a complete power outage and the cell phones are down and your power's gone and your local phone doesn't work? What do? Yell at your family. Yeah, you yell at your family, right. But unfortunately, that only goes a few feet. If you want to actually get some help, you need some kind of radio. And amateur radio operators typically have equipment that runs on batteries. And a lot of the repeater stations that are up on the mountaintops and high buildings oftentimes have emergency power. And I can tell you a story. One time back in 1989, I was in Oakland, California. Do you remember there was a big earthquake? Some of you weren't even born in 1989, but there was a big earthquake in California. Part of the Bay Bridge fell down, and one of the freeways collapsed, and it crushed some cars, and it was a bad thing. And I was actually in a store. I owned a store in Oakland at that time, and I had my walkie-talkie with me. And for a while, that was the only communication I had, because the signal lights were out. I mean, people were in really panic mode. And here I am helping direct traffic, finding out what's going on in the world, and it paid for itself right there. So you never know when you're going to have a need for amateur radio. So yeah, it can be fun, it can be exciting. And you have a question?
It's not a question, it's a comment.
Yeah.
I volunteer at the VA hospital.
Yes.
The guy who was the current director of the VA hospital was in the Katrina event.
Oh my, yes. Sure, big deal.
He said the only reliable communication he had was ham radio.
Yeah. I frequently talk to W6 VAH, which is the VA station in Loma Linda, I think, out in California. So I know a lot of those guys, but great service you guys provide. Thank you. So anyway, so there's a lot of reasons to get into ham radio, and you have your own choice. Some people just like to talk. I mean, me, for example. No, some people just like to talk. They don't care about building a radio or building an antenna. They just want to go buy a radio and buy an antenna and hang it up and talk to people. And other people don't like to talk to people at all. They're very shy. Are shy. A lot of ladies are shy. I don't know why that is, but they tend to be shy. But but they like to build stuff. I mean, I knew people that they're techies. They'll build a radio and it works, and they put it away and they'll go build another radio. Does that relate to anybody? You're like, yeah, okay. So there's a broad spectrum of types of people that can get involved in ham radio for a lot of different reasons. All right, going down this list here, why you want to get ham radio? It's everybody's choice. There's 3 classes of license. Who's a tech in here? Who's above a tech? So we got some, and who's an extra? Okay, we got a technician, we got a couple generals, we got an extra class. That means there's 3 classes of license. And there used to be a lot more. And I like it now the way it is. You used to have to know Morse code. And when, I asked you, some of you probably had to learn Morse code when you first got your license. And now you don't. Because digital technology has kind of eliminated the need for it. So the FCC and the ARRL have kind of kept up with the times. And because of that, amateur radio is a fast-growing service, or hobby, if we might use that term too. There's a lot more hams now than there's ever been in history. And it's because of that. It's not so scary to get in anymore. You go read a book, take a test. And the FCC, all they care about is, one, how to keep your transmissions in the bands you're allocated to, that you're not interfering with some police, fire, government communications, and that you're tell the world or show the world that you have a basic understanding of the hobby and the service. And that's what these books teach you. And has anybody here that hasn't started studying ham radio yet? So everybody's studied, even if you haven't got a license yet? Does anybody you don't have a license yet?
No, but I haven't studied that much out of the book there. So, but I've been with him.
Okay, well, talking about studying, that's important. So one of the questions is, where do you get the study guides, and how do you use the study guides, and how do you practice the tests? Well, first off, I've got samples of study guides up here, and they're very simple. Multiple choice. What I tell people when you're going through reading these to study, read the question, get a yellow highlighter, and highlight the correct answer. Because there's a question, there's 4 or 5 answers, and then there's a paragraph that explains why that's the right answer. And so if you read that and then highlight it, when you get the test, when the voluntary examiners give you the test, it's exactly the same wording, the same question, the same answer is if it's A, it's A. You don't have to know anything, you have to remember stuff. And that, the main thing is that you're going to not be operating out of band, that you're not doing stuff you're not supposed to do. It's not supposed to keep you out of the service or out of the hobby. It's supposed to help you get into it. And so by doing it this way, it's helped a lot of people. I mean, I know of people that are young people that are 6 and 7 years old get their licenses, and if a 6 or 7 year old can get it, you can get it. Trust me. So anyway, that's what I do. Highlight the answers, and then before the test, you go back and you read the questions, and the answers will pop out of you because it's the highlighted answer. And if you want to know more, let's say you're the techie guy here that wants to know why that's the answer and go into it in depth, you can do that. There's certainly an explanation there, but there's ham radio handbooks and things that will go into much more detail on why and how to build an antenna and why it works and the relationship between the electromagnetic waves and the voltage and the current spikes on all that stuff. You can learn that if you want it. But most people, they just want to put up an antenna and talk to somebody and they know it works. And you're the guy that wants to know why it works, right? So anyway, so that's my recommendation, is how to use the study guides. As far as practice tests, the internet is amazing. You can just Google ham radio practice test, and there's several sites will pop up that you can go in and take a test just like you're sitting in front of a volunteer examiner. And if you can go in and take those, and all of a sudden you're getting the percentage you need to pass, go take the test. It's not rocket science anymore. It used to be rocket science. I mean, literally. I'm talking like an old fart, but when I went to take my first license, I don't know, when did you get your license?
62.
Okay, so you had to go into an FCC office. You had to draw schematic diagrams of some oscillator or something. You had to take a code test, and you could not miss a digit. You had to know every single letter, and sending and receiving, right? So I love this. So anyway, it's way different now than it used to be, and it's way more, it makes a lot more sense now, because before it was like they were try not to get you to pass a license. Yeah, you had to know shit. I mean, sorry. All right, so anyway, so there's my recommendation. So internet access is a great tool for practicing the test, so do it. Okay, where do you take the test? Well, you could come here, because they're doing one tomorrow, but there are volunteer examiners in most every major city, and I would say find your local ham radio club. Yes?
Yeah, Rio Rancho has tests every month.
Yes, and so does Valencia County. They do monthly testing as well. So if you'll look on the back of your sheet, that is a listing of all the ham radio clubs in New Mexico. And if that isn't enough, just go to arrl.net and Google ham radio clubs, and for whatever state you want to be in, or if you have a family member in Chicago or something, you can find a local ham club, and virtually every ham club either does or knows somebody that does volunteer examining.
Does it cost to take the test?
Yeah, does it cost to take the test? Yeah, there's a small fee. I think it's around $15. Does anybody know exactly? $15.26 or something like that. And that's just an administrative fee, and that does not go to the volunteer examiners. That's why they call them volunteer examiners. They do not charge for that service, and it takes 3. You can't just have your buddy give you the test. It takes 3 hams that are qualified as volunteer examiners to administer the test. And the idea is to eliminate cheating, or at least reduce it. And most hams have a pretty high integrity. We don't want to get people involved that, by cheating, Okay, so there's a good resource for you. So where you go to take the test, you call the local ham club and find out. Finding the ham club, I just showed you that, and I mentioned the word Elmer. If you find a ham club, or you have a family member or something that could be your Elmer, your teacher, that's great. But I don't know a ham in the world that won't help somebody else become a ham. So, and I guess at this minute I'm your Elmer, okay? And if you need one, call me. I put my phone number right on the bottom down there, okay? I'm happy to talk offline and share things with you. What does it cost to get into ham radio? What do you think?
As much as you want.
There is no limit. It's kind of like age. How old do you have to be a ham radio operator?
Yes.
Warm and breathing. If you're warm and breathing and can pass the test, you can be a ham radio operator. And even the warm part's questionable. But some people are just cold and still breathing. But anyway, seriously, there is no age limit on getting a license. It's just passing the test. And I know a lot of people that have kids that have gotten into ham radio, and it's wonderful. And older people too. I mean, you think you're too old to learn, but you're not. So, all right. So, what does it cost to get into ham radio? You can go out here in the flea market and probably find a transceiver that you could use for a few bucks. I mean, they're brand new walkie-talkies you can buy for $20 or $30 or $40 on Amazon. But if you want to get into shortwave, HF, high frequency, that spectrum, you're going to need something a little bigger, a little more complicated, and a little more power typically. And you can buy radios like that starting maybe around $200 or $300 for an older one that's still working. Or you could spend $15,000. ICOM has a radio out now that's around 15 grand. The person on the other end has no idea if you're talking on a $200 radio or a $15,000 radio. It's just more bells and whistles, and part of it's probably ego, I don't know, but I do not have a $15,000 radio, trust me. But there's some really nice, even new radios under 1,000, entry level, and it's kind of what's your interest? Are you into digital modes? Certain radios that are more uniquely suited for digital types of modes, and some are more suited for just plain old voice and code, Morse code. How many here use Morse code or know Morse code? All of one of you. Okay, and that's not unusual these days. It's those of us that have been around the block a few times that we had to learn Morse code, but nowadays you don't. So, and I think that's just fine. You don't need it. It's fun though. It really is fun. You still use Morse code? What's your name?
Yeah. Duke.
Duke? Do you still use it?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's fun.
I cheat.
Oh, you have a code reader?
Yeah, I have a code reader, and it gets about 80% of it, and I get the other 20.
Yeah, that's great. And it does help you develop your own speed by hearing the code reader or seeing what people are saying. Because, learning Morse code, you think you learn letter by letter, but as you get faster and faster, you don't just hear a letter, you hear like a whole grouping of sounds. It's a word. And you start picking words out. And it's like you have a ticker tape going across your brain. It's just, you don't have to write everything down. You just make notes while it's going through. All right, questions? Yes.
One of the things that, I was talking about the power outage.
Yes.
My phone would not work, T-Mobile was down. This actually was okay with the Verizon pass-through fee.
Verizon was up, T-Mobile was down.
It was completely blocked. And we were talking about having, and this is for this, I had to ask that at the last club meeting because he's in the, amateur. AARC. Anyway.
Go ahead. Somebody might want to hear you.
Well,
Want to rephrase your question?
yeah, well, the question is really about power outages and what would be a nice amateur radio transceiver to get that you can put on battery, have handy, and actually be able to get to some pretty good receivers or, repeaters so you could find out what's going on.
Okay, excellent question. First off, there's a lot of amateur radio equipment runs on 12 volts. And you could use car batteries, you can use gel cell batteries, you can use DC, whatever batteries. Walkie-talkies tend to be all DC anyway, and they charge off of, your cigarette lighter plug or something in your car. Okay, yeah, but if you really get stuck and you want to talk to somebody a long way away, you're going to need an HF or a shortwave radio. And a lot of those run on 12 volts as well. In fact, funny you mention it, I'm planning on putting my whole station on solar, everything except my power amplifier. I've got a transceiver that runs on 12 volts. I've got UHF, VHF radios that run on 12 volts. And I have some solar panels and I have some batteries. So I just haven't put it all together yet, but I plan on doing that just for that reason, because when you do get a power outage and your communication is down, you need some power, typically battery, and the sun is free. And the sun keeps going even if your commercial power is out. So I would highly recommend looking into an economical solar power system to run your station. How many of you have heard of Harbor Freight?
I call it.
Every guy knows Harbor Freight. I guarantee it, because you go in there, it's like the candy store, right? You
I have a
go.
friend who called it Chinatown. So now
Chinatown, yeah. Well, anyway, they have a lot of interesting, varied stuff in there, and they do sell solar power systems in there fairly economically. Do you have one?
We have a cabinet by a while. The first couple of years that we were up there, we ran it strictly off of
solar.
Walmart battery and 2 sets of Harbor Freight panels.
Walmart batteries, the deep cycle 12-volt batteries, and $300 for a complete off-the-grid solar power system to run your station and maybe do a little bit of other stuff too, like run your lights and maybe watch TV. Sure. So that's a great question, and 12-volt radios do that.
But there's another question to it too, is what kind of antenna would you want if you're going to be doing, for emergencies? What do you want?
Excellent question. What antennas should you have for emergency purposes? Well, first off, if you're at home and you have a power outage, assuming you probably have an antenna already. But if you're not, let's say you're out camping somewhere and you need an antenna. I RV. I have my wife and I travel in an RV a lot, and I have antennas that'll fit in a Ziploc bag that are just wire and coax, and they're already cut to a frequency. You just hoist up the center of it off a tree, hook it into your radio, and you're on the air. You don't have to spend a lot of money on antennas. In fact, that's a topic for a whole talk. In fact, the one just before this talked about antennas. Were you in it? Yeah. So, Chip talked a lot about different types of portable and antennas, and it's unlimited. What your situation is, if you want to spend a lot of money or not. Personally, I'm not.
My question is, what frequencies can you get national emergency information, local?
What frequencies can you get emergency information on? Well, first off, your local AM and FM radio stations are going to provide you emergency information too. You know, the SIG alerts and stuff like that that come out on commercial radio. So having a good radio that's just for listening is smart. You know, something, even they have some that have cranks on them that they'll crank up and they'll run for 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's a Sage and it's a crank radio.
Yeah.
You can run on batteries.
Sure, yeah, and those are real nice to have too for emergency use. But if you want to talk to somebody, you want something that can transmit, and you want to be able to transmit on a frequency that's going to serve you. Because if you're backpacking in the middle of the, you know, Grand Tetons National Park somewhere, and there's no other communication besides shortwave, they make these little tiny radios that run on HF. You know, that you can talk 5 watts and talk to people, you know, hundreds of miles away. So there's a lot of that stuff out there too. You can pick them up for a few $100. In fact, ask me, I've got one on my table out there. So, all right, other questions? Huh? No, mine's not 200, but it's not much over that. Anyway, other questions?
Well, what was the brand that you had as far as?
It's a Yaesu. It's an FT817ND. It's a QRP, they call it QRP. You know what QRP is? It means low power, typically under 10 watts of power. So if you're operating on shortwave and you're considered to be QRP, you're using low power. And you can talk a long ways on low power. In fact, that very radio I was just talking about, this little Yaesu, it fits in the palm of your hand. It was 160 through UHF frequencies. I was on talking to the east side, an island off the east coast of Africa with it a few months ago, running 5 watts. Mauritius. Mauritius Island. It's just north of Madagascar.
Yeah, I guess that was CW.
No, that was sideband.
Wow.
It was a funny story too, because and this is a good proof that you don't need a ton of power. I heard this guy operating, and I called him, and he came back to me, and he couldn't believe I was only running 5 watts. And so he kept cranking his power down until he got to 5 watts, and he really said, wow, you really are running 5 watts, because we were talking back and forth. But you know, conditions are everything. You know, there's sometimes you can't get around the block. I don't care what you're running, and sometimes you can run, you know, I've talked to Australia on 500 milliwatts, half a watt before, Q5, and that was on 40 meters. 40 meters. Now, talking about meters, I mentioned those. The HF frequency bands operate typically between 3 kilohertz, or megahertz rather, and 30 megahertz, and it's divided up into segments. So as you upgrade your class of license, you're entitled to using more segments or more pieces of the segments. Technician class license, for example, you're primarily UHF and VHF. You can get on 10 meters, that's 28 megahertz, that's on the high end of the HF spectrum. But you can operate Morse code on lower frequencies, on 75, 80 meters, 40 meters, 15 meters. You've got little pieces of band spectrum you can get on and use. When you upgrade to general class, the middle class license, you've got pieces of the whole thing. You've got probably 90% of the whole ham radio spectrum that you have access to as a general class. There's certain little pieces that are extra class only. And you know, those, a lot of times the people that want to use really super long distance communication, they call it DX. They want to talk DX. So a lot of the people, because it's less crowded typically in the extra portions of the band, so you can hear people better, and that's why they tend to be more DX oriented. But anyway, that's what you get when you go to extra class. You've got full amateur privileges, and up to what's the maximum power that a ham radio operator can use or can run? A lot. Yeah, typically it's considered to be 1,500 watts. And the newer radios, the amplifiers now can run 1,500 watts. You know, a lot of commercial radio stations don't run 1,500 watts. Seriously. So a ham radio station can often put out more signal, more power than a commercial broadcast. I mean, KKOB here in town runs 50,000 watts. We're not talking about them. But a lot of the smaller stations, especially at night, they might drop down to 50 watts or 500 watts. So it's a... Say again?
Do people play music on ham?
Okay, the question is, do people play music on ham radio? Legally, no. Ham radio or amateur radio is not legally used or cannot legally be used for commercial purposes. And it cannot be used for broadcasting. That's where you just, the only exceptions are, and there are very few, is like the ARRL has special privileges to broadcast news bulletins and code practice and things like that. The ARRL, the American Radio Relay League, that is the national organization that supports amateur radio. They carry our torch, so to speak, to the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. And they have a station, it's W1AW in Newington, Connecticut, and they do broadcast periodically code practice, news bulletins, and things like that. But the average ham, it's not legal to do broadcasting music. Now, if you sang to somebody on the radio, most people probably wouldn't consider that music. So.
You don't know.
You're right. I know. I play banjo too, and I've done a little diddling with a banjo on the radio, but just to show somebody I actually had one. But that's a long ways from being called music. Yes.
I remember a long time ago, the comment was you couldn't do a phone patch or something like that to another country because it would be competing with phones.
Not
Is that
true.
still in the rules?
No. What it is, that's called a third-party agreement. And the United States has third-party agreements with a lot of countries around the world which allow phone patching type of communication where a ham at the other end can have their neighbor come over and talk on the radio or call somebody and have that voice come over the radio. As long as it's legal in that country and this country, you have to have a third-party agreement. A lot of countries do. You'd have to look it up because I don't know which ones do or don't. But I used to run a lot of phone patches back in the 60s with Vietnam and all that stuff. There was a lot of people that didn't have any way to communicate back home except through ham radio. And believe me, it's a great thing to be able to provide that service for our military. Yes?
Here a couple of years ago on the Mega Link down here, I did hear, I don't know if they still have it or not, they had the auto patch, and I heard somebody that was stuck in the mountains who was able to call his wife.
Sure.
The phone through the
Yeah.
radio.
So the mention here is auto patch. Well, a lot of UHF and VHF repeaters, that you can access with your walkie-talkie, have auto patches, and you can hit up a code, bring up dial tone, dial a phone number, and talk. And it's a valid communication service, and it's saved a lot of people's behinds. And do you want an example? It saved me one time, literally. This was back in somewhere in the 70s, mid-70s, and I had a UHF walkie-talkie, 440 megahertz walkie-talkie. And I walked outside of my apartment. I wasn't married at that time, and I walked out of my apartment, and the kid across the street came into me and said, "Hey, mister, somebody just shot your car." And I said, "What?" And I looked at my car, and sure enough, there's a big dent in the side of it. It looked like a pellet gun hit it. You know, a big missing piece of paint about that big. And so, and he said it came from that house. So I went over to the house and I talked to the person. Well, the mother of the person came out and tried to deny everything, and I said, "I'm sorry, but we have a witness, and I'm calling the sheriff." And then this young kid, I don't know, teenager, came out and pointed the gun right in my face, and I could tell it was a pellet gun. So I turned my back, grabbed my walkie-talkie, I called the local sheriff, and first off, there was a guy who washed his car. He says, "Hey, I need you as a witness," and I called the sheriff, and within 5 minutes, this guy was in handcuffs. So that was worth the price of admission right there for me to be a ham. You know, but you know, stuff like that happens. There's a lot of emergency applications for ham radio, and it's limited, limitless. I mean, it literally is. Okay, what other questions do you have?
Well, I have questions about, suppose they call a national emergency, we're going to be polite about what that would be, and would all these bands be up, or would there be certain bands?
If there was a national emergency, unless there's declared martial law or something, which is pretty rare, you will still have access to all the amateur radio frequencies. I mean, it was back when World War II, ham radio operators were asked to not be transmitting. And that's the last time that there was any restriction on amateur radio broadcasting. But after the war was over, ham radio came right back.
But what I'm asking is, because if you want to find out what's really going on, you may not be getting it in New Mexico. You might have to go out of the state or go to an eastern state.
You're talking about if commercial broadcasts were down, if there was no TV and no radio, and we're talking a catastrophic disaster here, something really bad. It's probably too deep to get into here, but different times of the day, different frequencies will allow you to broadcast different distances. And so gaining an awareness through experience of what bands are going to work to what areas of the country at different times of the day will help you do that. But you can get just about anywhere in the country as long as you know what band to get on at any given time.
I think it's worth a plug. When you do have your license, one of the things they have here is the HF Academy, which is going on today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you can really get details of answers to things like that.
Yeah, good point. HF Academy, and you can look at your directory of events here for this weekend, and it's worth sticking your nose in there and learning. There's a lot of information to be had. Okay, what other questions? Any answers? Okay, well, I just wanted to mention that the QST magazines up here are all for free. The study guides I use as show and tell, I'd like to hang on to those, but you're welcome to come up and grab anything you wish off of that. That way I don't have to take it home. And if you have no more questions, I'm good. Happy to answer.
I want to see that QRP station that you have out there.
Okay. Yeah, it's out. I'm out there. You'll find me. Are you guys good? You ready to get your license? Are you going tomorrow? You ready? Have you done a lot of practice tests? You're passing them?
Keep going.
Well, come and tell me tomorrow how it goes.
All right.
All right. How about you guys? You're thinking about it? Is that what you said? Tomorrow? Are you ready? What's your name, by the way? Amber? Okay, I'll listen for you on the radio. Not too many Ambers around on the radio. All right, and what was your name?
Josh.
Josh? Nice to meet you. You'll be the resident techie here, I can tell.
Well, maybe. We'll see. It sticks.
And what class of license are you?
I just have a technician.
Tech? Are you going to upgrade?
I don't know.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, I haven't studied it at all, so doing it tomorrow would be...
Well, you might surprise yourself.
Yeah, oh, that's right. When I took my technical, they gave me the general just for free, and I almost passed it just making this again.
Well, there you go. And that's true. And that's worthy of mentioning, too. When you do take your test and you pay your $15, if you pass technician, you can take the next test for free. You did it, and you passed.
And I didn't study.
Well, he didn't either. Yeah, but you know...
Looked at it, and I made the decision not to take it because I was down a ways. I wasn't passing consistently. And I paid $15. I took the test. I passed it.
You never know. You never know. Because, you know, a lot of these tests, the test questions are not tricks. They're common sense, a lot of them. And most of you here, maybe all of you, have common sense. So, you know, and you know, they're mostly multiple choice, so you're going to get 25% right if you just guess. And then there's the percentage that are sort of stupid, obvious, you know. And then so maybe you'll get 50% by just sort of a halfway educated guess, and then it's from there it's just getting lucky or really getting analytical about it. But you know, it's worth a try. So if you do take it and pass it, don't refuse to take the next class test because it's free. You might get lucky. What do you think?
I haven't studied enough.
What, have you studied at all?
I just started reading the book,
When?
I guess about a month ago.
Have you taken any practice tests?
No, I have other things to kind of do.
Because that's a really good way to know if you're ready or not. Just go online, they're free, and take tests. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't do that. Please take some QST magazines.